actors, including Steve Coogan and Oscar winner Tilda Swinton, have been criticised after they condemn Israel's military action in Gaza, but didn't mention Hamas's terror attack. So more than 2,000 artistes, actors and musicians signed a letter from a group calling itself Artists for Palestine UK. The letter says, our governments are not only tolerating war crimes, but aiding and abetting them. We support the global movement against the destruction of Gaza and the mass displacement of the Palestinian people. We demand that our governments end their military and political support for Israel's actions. Or what, can I just say? Or what? We demand. What are you going to do? So stop starring in Hamlet, was me. No one cares. Let's cross now and speak to David Mensa, who is a Middle East expert and a former director of Labour Friends of Israel. Now, look, David, I was obviously kind of poking fun at them there, but I think from your perspective, there is actually a very serious criticism of this particular group of people, isn't there? And I'll just throw that over to you.
Look, I'm speaking to you live from Tel Aviv, and I think the perspective from here right now is, to me, it looks like, you've got to be a special kind of Jew hater to sign this sort of drivel at a time. But 13 days ago, when my people, Jewish people, that certainly recognizes evil, when we see it, when we've suffered the most appalling day of savagery since, I think, the Holocaust, this letter is so misguided and misplaced. I simply say to this group of misfits and weirdos that I invite them to rescue their ailing careers and try their chances as artists in Gaza under the Hamas regime. If they do that, I promise to sign a letter when they are locked up by Hamas. They'd be lucky if they're locked up, because they'd be most likely, judging from Hamas's record, have their throat cut.
Well, it's strong stuff, obviously, David. Do you think that they just fundamentally don't understand the problem, or is it that you think that there is an undertone of anti-Semitism here?
Look, I said quite clearly, these are special kinds of Jew haters. We can't anymore just forgive people for being ignorant. The terrible events that have happened in this country to the Jewish people, the most appalling savagery, which is still today being unfolded. Still today we've had volleys of rockets, but not only that, we believe that there are still some of these Hamas operatives roaming around the country, waiting for this moment, for another moment to strike. We cannot excuse this as just ignorance. At the very least, they could recognize that there is no monopoly of pain in this region. But in this particular case, Hamas are a genocidal group that need to be defeated, and they have chosen their side, the wrong side, I might add.
It is a very, very interesting interaction, and I suspect the kind of thing that you might do if you did live in a bit of a lovey bubble, actually, and not quite understand the wider consequences there. I would imagine, though, David, that everybody who signed this letter would deny that they are a Jew hater. That is, of course, your views. I will just read out a couple of things on this letter. So, Gaza is already a society of refugees, it says, and the children of refugees. Now, in their hundreds of thousands, bombarded from air, sea and land, Palestinians whose grandparents were forced out of their homes at the barrel of a gun are again being told to flee or face collective punishment on an unimaginable scale. What do you make of that?
Of course, a massive misrepresentation of history. I don't want to remind your viewers and listeners that, of course, 80% of Gaza's residents voted for Hamas. That was their one and single election before Hamas killed the opposition and got rid of all elections. Unfortunately, there is not much of a peace movement in Gaza. When the Twin Towers came down, they handed out sweets and candies in Gaza. When these poor hostages were paraded through the streets of Gaza, they handed out sweets and candies in Gaza. When the most terrible barbarism meted out on whether it's Israelis or anyone else, they hand out sweets and candy in Gaza. The best thing for peace right now would be to erase Hamas from the face of the earth. That will then give the Palestinian people a chance to take up one of those many peace deals which they have rejected, the many, many peace deals which they continue to reject, and finally put out their hand in genuine peace with my people, the people of Israel, the Jewish people.
Yeah. What would your direct message to Steve Coogan, Tilda Swinton, Maxine Peake, who are amongst the more famous people who have put their names to this letter, what would your direct message to them be?
I would say that it would be a great idea if you took a little trip down to Hamas and educated yourself into the Gaza Strip and see what it's like for artists trying to, perhaps give over any sort of opposition to the genocidal Islamic fundamentalist regime. Just educate yourself, go and visit, and then come over to Israel and see the flourishing democratic scene which exists here in Israel, and compare the two, and then make a decision about where you'd rather live and which kind you'd like to live. But that is being too kind to them, because I have had enough of this idea about, people are misinformed. This is not misinformed. There has been a genocide committed against my people. The most appalling act of inhumanity committed by people. These are free. The advocates of these terrible acts, they live streamed their acts, not like the Nazis that tried to destroy the evidence. They live streamed it on TikTok, on Telegram, on Facebook. They live streamed it. This is no longer an excuse to say, they don't quite understand, do they? Because they're in their lovey bubble. Unfortunately, I recognize this sort of stupidity, and it's a hatred as well. And there's a name for it. I call it.
Unfortunately, right on cue, David, we are now looking at another explosion in Gaza. That's a couple in the last 10 minutes or so. They describe in this letter, they quote the Israeli Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant's depiction of Palestinians as, apparently, human animals. These signatories say that Palestinians have become people to whom almost anything can be done. Do you think that there is a certain kind of idiocy here from the likes of Steve Coogan, who no doubt would jump on an LGBTQ plus bandwagon, who would talk about human rights, who would quite possibly talk about women's rights, who has benefited massively from being able to operate and live in a free liberal society, to, they're on the side of the Palestinian people, they say, but clearly a lot of those people support, a hardline Islamist regime. That is, I think, quite a hypocritical situation, isn't it?
Look, I would prefer to quote to you Rishi Sunak, who appeared alongside the Israeli Prime Minister just today, whose words were, "We want you to win." Those were Rishi's words. Very, very impressive, and a real shot in the arm for the people of Israel. Look, there have been 10 murdered Brits, 5 missing Brits. I would encourage some of these stars, most of them are nobodies with no career whatsoever. But I grant you, Steve Coogan is a big
Do you
name.
think people, David, let me just ask you this quickly. Let me just ask you this quickly. Do you think that Jewish people should boycott anything that Steve Coogan does in future?
Look, there are so few Jewish people in the UK. There's about 300,000. It's barely a scintilla of a number of people. So that wouldn't make a difference neither here nor there. I would simply say to Steve Coogan, educate yourself.
Okay.
Have a look at the situation of freedom in Gaza and even in the West Bank, where artists are routinely locked up, if not worse. Educate yourself and then make a decision.
Look, David, thank you very much. And it's good to see that you are keeping safe in Tel Aviv. It's David Mencher there, who is a Middle East expert and a former director of the Labour Friends of Israel. Just to say as well, those are live scenes of Gaza. Of course, all of the lovely celebrities who have decided to sign this letter would probably look at that and say maybe it justifies what they're saying. Of course, we support the global movement against the destruction of Gaza, they say, the mass displacement of the Palestinian people. I completely understand what David was saying there about this idea that what went on as a result of Hamas's actions are not condemned in this letter, and you have to find that quite intriguing, don't you?